Okay, in this video, I'd like to talk more about MH370, and tonight I want to focus on the orbs, because the orbs might not be what you think they are. Meaning that you might think the orbs are UFOs or some type of craft that are rotating around this plane and causing it to disappear, but that might not be the case. What could be happening is those orbs could be something called programmed plasma, and they're an effect from the plasma confinement condition that is created in the atmosphere, and that's how they're able to teleport the jet. So this all comes from Tesla teleportation that was developed after Nikola Tesla died, and the US government got a hold of Tesla's papers, and then eventually Raymond Bachagho redid his experiments with the Tesla teleporters, and then they got to the point of having plasma confinement from that, which Sterling Colgate developed under DARPA's Project Pegasus. So this whole thing is interesting because these plasma orbs could be something that actually has its own intelligence, meaning it's basically got its own consciousness, because consciousness operates faster than light. It operates off of the dielectricity. So it's using 0.618. It's not using electromagnetism, which would be 1.618. It's not using quadrupolar polarity. It's using the complete opposite. So what this is doing is basically it's Tesla's monopolar system. And it's basically just having a situation where you're creating this field of radiant energy in a localized area, and then you're able to go into the field and teleport to another time, place, and these orbs, which people might assume were UFOs because they kind of look like the whole Tic Tac thing, and which they could be. I'm not ruling that out, but this could just be an effect of the plasma confinement condition. So let's get into this, I'll explain more. Okay, to understand anti-gravity, you must understand what gravity is. Gravity is nothing other than when two magnets come together. It's known as magnetic attraction, but it's not magnetic attraction at all. It's called dielectric acceleration. And this is what Ken Wheeler's figured out. This is the missing piece to the puzzle that nobody's got but Ken. So by combining what he's telling you here and what Eric Dollard is saying, Ken's got the magnetism side of it, Eric Dollard has the electrical side, and I have the whole pyramid and the earth grounding side with my orgone box going on and my concrete pyramids that are producing this torsion field, which acts like cloud busters, and they churn up the ether in my localized area. And the military love me, but we'll get into that in further videos. Okay, so you have to understand that gravity is really what is called commonly as magnetic attraction. It's just two magnets coming together. But that's not what's going on with magnetic attraction, okay? So we'll get back to this. What the Earth is a giant magnet. And you and everything else are stuck to it because you're made out of magnetism. What I mean is that you and everything you see in the visible universe is glued together by magnetism. It glues all the subatomic hydrogen particles together to form matter. Okay, so this Earth is nothing other than a giant magnet. It's no different than this ring magnet. All the magnetism's on the outside. All the dielectricity is on the inside at the center. Where there's no magnetism, it's 0G, 0 Gauss, 0 time, because there's 0 spin. You have to have spin to have time. It's no different than the Earth. All the magnetism is on the outside. All the dielectricity is at the dead center of this thing, where there's 0G, 0 Gauss, 0 time, because there's 0 frequency, because there's 0 magnetism. It's complete dielectricity. And then you'd have an event horizon or an equator, just like with the magnetism and the dielectricity. So there's 3 conditions going on. In magnetism and dielectricity, you have a plane of inertia in between. Here you would have a positive hemisphere in the north and a negative hemisphere in the south with an equator between. There's always 3 conditions going on because everything's working like synergy. There's no dualities. That's part of the illusion. Okay, so let's break the illusion some more. Gravity is nothing other than magnetic attraction, but magnetic attraction doesn't really exist because this is what Ken Wheeler came up with. And this is the key to understanding everything. If you don't have this, you don't have the key. So by putting Eric Dollard with his electricity, Tesla 2.0 stuff, combining him with Ken Wheeler's magnetism, and then all my stuff with Crow Castle, my concrete pyramids, which are cloudbusters, which produce torsion fields and churn up the ether in my local spot, and my orgone box, and all my Coral Castle stuff, this whole thing's figured out. So it's not it's not magnetic attraction, it's dielectric acceleration. And what I mean is, if you take 2 magnets and they start to pull together, that's not really magnetic attraction, that's just what they call it. Those 2 magnets are actually pulling to this dip, this negative, this dielectric in counter space. So all heavenly bodies are doing the same thing in space. So what's going on is the lowest pressure point into counter space. So it's that void, it's that negative. So here you would have your magnetism, and then here you would have your dielectricity. So here would be your positive, and here would be your negative. Of course, you'd have a plane of inertia and an equator in between, just like there's always 3 conditions. So in order to break the magnetism, in order to break the gravity, what you have to do is exert force. So you have to jump or fly a plane or shoot a rocket or something to get off the surface of the Earth. Because the magnetic attraction or the dielectric acceleration is pulling you back down. But when you remove those so-called lines of force, they're not really lines of anything. It's all fields. What you're doing is you're creating not anti-grav, you're just creating anti-magnetic. So that's the opposite of the pull. It's pushing up. It's that simple. That's why they don't want you to look into this stuff. It's all about the right geometry. And when those so-called lines of force are broken, you can do neat things like rotation with ease. You can move with ease. And it's all done by anti-magnetic. because it's dielectricity. So you're dealing with these conditions. So in order to understand this stuff, you got to first understand that. Okay, so what's going on with this whole thing is, okay, there's this guy named Mike Merkham, and he's a time traveler that has created this device using, he started off small with a small Jacob's ladder. And what he was doing was he took two coat hangers and you just basically apply electricity to them, and a Jacob's ladder, the arc will jump from one rod to the other, and then it'll travel up until it loops back around, and then it'll keep climbing, and it just keeps cycling, and that's how everything's working. Everything's getting higher and higher in capacitance, and then it's dumping back into the dielectric or the counter space or the ground, back into negative electricity, back into positive, back into negative, and it's a complete loop because the dielectrics always fill in back up. That's why all the lightning strikes and everything is, it's hitting the earth and it's grounding because it's always dumping back into counter space. The earth or the ground is counter space. So this radiant energy field that's created using Tesla teleportation is the same thing that Mike Merkham's doing with his small Jacob's ladder. But he eventually got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he jumped through it. This guy was on Art Bell twice, and he ain't no joke. So what he was setting up is basically the same thing that Bushago was setting up in DARPA's Project Pegasus. Is he's setting up two rods, and he's causing that field of energy to become to the point where it makes really neat stuff happen. He first threw a screw through there, and the screw disappeared in the field, and then it reappeared about half a second later in another spot. So then he kept throwing bigger and bigger stuff through the field. But when he first tested this and first got it going, what he was doing, and this is how this whole thing's working, is he couldn't get the Jacob's ladder arc to start because he was on his back porch and he was using a lot more power. So what he did, he took a CD player and took the laser out of it. So he's on his back porch in 15 degrees. And he thinks this is what had everything to do with it, was this temperature differential between the laser that he had and it being 15 degrees in the air. So to start this thing, he grabbed his laser and he starts messing around with it, and he gets the arc to start. Well, he noticed that when he would keep the laser on, he said he could keep stirring this plasma. And when he started stirring the plasma is when all these effects started happening. So this is the same deal that's going on in the atmosphere. And that could be how these orbs are actually manifesting. Like I said, they might not be physical craft, but they also could be, because they would have the same effect. So what Mike Merkham is doing is creating the same Tesla radiant energy field to occur in a localized area, and then he's teleporting stuff through there. And what he noticed is that the more power that you put to it, the further that it would go into the future, or the further distance that it would go in space. So what he ended up doing was building a huge one of these, and Art Bell even wanted to go there and tape this thing, but he didn't. And Mike Merkham jumped through this thing, and he completely disappeared and went 2 years forward in time, ended up 800 miles east of where he was, and had to come back and rebuild his whole thing. So the guy was missing for 2 years on our time, but it was instantaneous 2 years ahead in his time. So it's like Tesla was saying when he accidentally got electrocuted and had the power on before his assistant threw the switch back off. He said he could see the past, present, and future all occurring at the same time. So, or all at once, I guess, because time is nothing. But this is how Dollard explains this whole thing. Oh, one more thing before I get into this, I want to point this out. Okay, there's this thing called a Leica antenna. Might not have it spelled right there. A Leica antenna is really interesting because a Leica antenna is something that lifeguards carry and that the National Weather Service has. They use it for lightning detection and thunderstorm detection because it detects dielectricity. A Leica antenna also detects torsion field from pyramids, and it also detects portals. So, a Leica antenna is very, very, very important and valuable. If you look at the one at Kennedy Space Center, their antenna looks like a pyramid. And what it is, it's the same thing that they're telling you that a neutrino detector is, like in Antarctica, okay? It's not detecting neutrinos. What it's detecting is dielectricity. Anti-magnetism, faster than light, 0.618. Same torsion field that consciousness is operating on. That's what the deal is. There's no neutrinos, it's just dielectricity. They just keep coming up with stuff and not using these words. If you're not using these words, it's clearly clear that you don't know what you're talking about. These words have been out there since the early 1900s at least. And if you're not even using the terminology, then you apparently don't know what you're talking about. If you're still talking about electrons, protons, quarks, all these other things that don't exist because everything goes to a positive charge, then you clearly don't know what you're talking about. Go back to your history books, start studying. So, what's going on is the neutrino detector in the Antarctic is not detecting neutrinos. They got all these detectors buried in the ice in an array, just like the HARP antenna. It's the same thing. It's using ELF. And what's going on is they're trying to detect craft, or they're trying to detect portals that are open and closing. So they're not detecting any neutrinos because there's no such thing. What they're detecting is dielectricity. That's what they ain't telling you. Okay, so this is how Dollard explains this whole thing. This is kind of the radio end of it. This might be all we do for tonight, but oh yeah, I want to talk about that zap too. That zap is xenon gas. When that plane disappears, it's like a camera flash. So we're gonna get into all this. It's down the road. So a crystal detector is an electromagnetic component used to rectify radio alternating current. Using asymmetric conductor of crystal discovered in 1874. It was first used to receive radio waves in 1894, improved in 1904. The crystal detector was the first semiconductor diode. The crystal radio, its function is to rectify the radio signal, converting it from alternating current to pulsing DC to extract the audio signal modulation from the radio frequency carrier wave. Okay, what they're talking about here is they're basically talking about having dielectricity and magnetism. You always have these two things going, always. What happens in the Heaviside telegraph equation is where there's the dielectricity runs at faster than light and the magnetism only runs light speed. So one was arriving faster than the other. In this case, what they're talking about is taking just the dielectricity and removing this other, the propagating wave. So that's how this whole operation is running. So you can use a battery operated buzzer to generate a test signal when a rectifying spot has been found in the crystal. A buzzing sound is heard in the earphone. So this could be how they're getting the precise lock on that jet. And when all of a sudden they get that tone, it's just like you get the tone when you're getting ready to launch a missile from a F-16. You get that lock on, and then that's what it is. So that would be the point at which the wormhole opens and you see what you see. So a crystal conducts current in only one direction, stripping of the oscillations on one side of the signal, leaving a pulsing DC whose amplitude does not average zero but varies with the audio signal. Okay, that's how scalar operates. It goes up and down, not left and right, pretty much. So a bypass capacitor across the earphone smooths out the waveform, removing the radio frequency carrier pulses, leaving the audio signal. Because when you're dealing with radio waves, you're dealing with something that's AC, that's a transverse wave. But when you're dealing with the DC, the dielectric, it's a straight shot. There's no sine wave in it. It's just complete dielectricity, faster than light, faster than 186,000 miles per second. You can use also use the word crystal to crystal contact for reception. You can get a spark gap transmission from high current by atmospheric electric charge from an antenna, or a high RF current leaking into the receiver from a spark gap during transmission. Spark gap transmitter. A spark gap transmitter generates RF electromagnetic waves using a spark gap. Okay. The torsion, okay. An AM radio band is 148 and 283 hertz in long wave. Medium frequency is the radio spectrum. AM is in shortwave bands 2.3 to 26 megahertz. FM is VHF, very high frequency, 65 to 108 megahertz. So AM travels as ground waves, which follow the contours of the Earth. AM can travel hundreds of miles due to high frequency. FM can't travel beyond the visible horizon, 40 miles. So radio waves are parallel and adjacent to the surface of the Earth. Ground waves propagate in vertical polarization, with their magnetic field horizontal and their electrical field vertical. Okay, so via LF waves, the ionosphere and the Earth act as a waveguide. The ground also acts as a dielectric. Medium and short wave reflect off the ionosphere at night, and during the day, the lower D wave of the ionosphere forms and absorbs low frequency energy. This prevents the skywave propagation on medium wavelengths in the daytime hours. At night, the D layer dissipates. this is when my pyramids really step up. I mean, they're constantly generating, but after 5 o'clock, that's when they really start busting the clouds and the chemtrails. So, microwave field theory. The interface of a dielectric and conductor supports surface wave transmission. The field components of the wave diminish with distance from the interface. Electromagnetic energy is not converted to the surface wave field to another form of energy except in leaky or loosey surface waves, such that the wave does not transmit power normal to the interface, i.e. its evanescence along that dimension. Okay, so here we get into what I'm talking about. Surface plasma polarization, SSP, is an electromagnetic surface wave that travels along an interface between two medium with different dielectric constants. It exists because one is positive, one is negative, just like a capacitor. The wave propagation parallel to interface and decays exponentially vertical to this property is called evanescence. Okay, then you get into this whole thing called magnetodielectric electricity. This is the negative. The opposite of electromagnetism. It's the opposite of quadrupolar polarity. In this Dollar interview, he says that Tesla was using what we call true single-phase electricity or monopolar electricity. That's the key to his transmission of electricity and mechanical energy to convert it to a single-phase form. Monopolar electricity is anti-electromagnetism. And then he talks about Philo Farnsworth, who he was friends with his son. This is the guy that came up with TV. Philo Farnsworth built the multi-packer tube, a secondary emission negative resistance tube. When hooked to a Tesla coil, it exhibits electrical oscillations. Dollard said it's probably the world's only real free energy device that anyone has ever demonstrated that can be reproduced. Dollar says the best conducting medium we got is the Earth. So the Earth is the best conducting medium we have because the Earth is ground. The Earth is counter space. The Earth is dielectricity at the center. So the Earth is the best conducting medium we've got. The devices are one conductor electrical generators. Just connect one terminal to the common conducting medium and all the other terminal devices will receive the energy. There's no pain of wires or waveguides to bound the energy. These are called unbound waves. And that's what you do is to take this whole thing that they had set up from plasma confinement being put on a stage to taking it to the atmosphere with a K dielectric value of 1. So, unbound waves is the key. Tesla's magnifying transmitter was a converter which converts electromagnetic energy into what is called magnetodielectric energy. Dielectric side of electricity is the side that represents the faster than light phenomenon. Reich found that orgone and the dielectric field are basically one and the same. If a dielectric field has the proper pulsations, you could almost call it orgone. Okay, so that's key, because when you're pulsing the field, Wilhelm Reich is saying that it's just the same thing as the orgone. So dielectric is an insulating material that has to be organic. Evidence of the dielectric field to orgone is the cosmic superimposition effect, where you take a low pressure gas in a bulb, for instance, and place it in two superimposed dielectric fields. Then you get a spiral, spiral formations forming. So Reich wrote the book Cosmic Superimposition, and these formations appear as spheres, galaxies, and other cosmic forms. The high voltage terminal of a Tesla transmitter puts out a dielectric current, a current of many amps flowing through free space without any electrons. This is a true electrical current. This is the case of the Tesla coil. You can draw a spark from an insulator. The golden ratio discharge into wood, okay? So all discharges tend to form the phi ratio pattern. So this whole thing that's basically the radio side, and what Dollard is saying is this is key to understanding stuff too, is the whole Earth, Sun, other planets relationship. In the right angle relationship between the Earth and the Sun, radio and electric conditions on the Earth tend to be disturbed. It's called radio astrology. In radio astrology, astronomers won't even talk about it. RCA based all their circuit predictions on it. So everything, once again, is following this right-hand rule. And I think that's the point that we're going to take it to tonight. Like I said, monopolar electricity is the opposite of quadrupolar polarity, and everything's operating on that right-hand rule. And that's exactly how this thing is operating too. It's lifting up and it's going to the right. That's why you see this right angle in it. But it's all working on these basic same principles. And like I said, these crafts, there might not be anything that is a craft at all. It might just be something that's being generated from all these conditions that are being created. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please check out my other ones. Have a good day. Thanks.